everybody. Welcome to episode 10 of the Hyperbaby podcast. This week, we had a chance to sit down with Jefferson Bonar. He is the author of the Realm Jumper fantasy books, as well as the Armada mystery series. I was fortunate to be a beta reader for Jefferson's first novel, and we've been working together ever since. I'm really happy to have him with us today. He has a lot to share when it comes to the world of self-publishing and story creation. I think anybody in the creative field would just learn a lot from him. In fact, that's kind of why our show ran a little long this week, is because he had so much to share, I just couldn't cut anything out. So I hope you're ready to take notes. We're going to jump right into our conversation that's already going on and start with why he decided to leave a cushy day job and follow his dream of being a writer. Thanks for listening.
I reached the end of my tether with that. But obviously, when you live in a hyper-capitalist world, especially my last 9-to-5 job was in Manhattan, was in New York. Wow. A place that you can't live without one. You know, you couldn't exist there without a job with long hours. I was making really good money, you know, and I had just hit the end of the road where I was like, this rat race, you know, this kind of staring at the clock 8 hours a day, waiting for it to be over. That emptiness that comes from that life, you know, the hole was bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. And by the time I met my wife, I was just ready I want to do anything else. I just, you know, there's got to be a different way to live. And it was around that time that I had just started to, you know, look into self-publishing and write books and things like that. I was hoping that was my ticket out of it. What I vastly underestimated was how much time it was going to take me to develop as a writer, to get my writing to the point where it was sellable. And that was me having to transition out of my previous writing life, which was writing scripts for film. And I don't think I really understood just how different a set of skills you need for writing novels is from writing film.
That makes sense.
It's really, really different.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so this past 5 years has kind of been, you know, a crash course in how you write a novel and not have it read like a novelized script. Because that's when I look at those old Realm Jumpers books, you know, they're very movie-like, they're very scripty, they're very visual, like they're rigidly visual. Here's what you're seeing happen from the outside. And then it's a lot of snappy dialogue, which I love snappy dialogue, but snappy dialogue doesn't work as well in books. You know, it works well when you have a good, you know, an actor speaking the lines and good comic timing. But what I didn't realize is that everybody reads that dialogue with a different voice in their head. And some people were reading it and they didn't get the snappiness of it. So it just seemed like too much, you know? They were like, these guys are just talking and talking. And I was like, but it's snappy, look. And then I would say it out loud. And they're like, oh, like really fast like that. Oh, yeah. But I realized in their head it wasn't, because they're used to reading books where dialogue is a bit slower, you know, where it's about the meaning versus, you know, how fun it is. And I was like, oh, this dialogue doesn't work in novels in any way because it's dialogue from a film script.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So what kind of, you know, not to get in the weeds too much, but how did you personally, you know, look introspectively at that and go, you know, because you got to be very introspective and subjective of what you're doing to improve. Like, was that a fairly painful process for you, or do you think you just kind of innately have that ability to kind of self-regulate?
That's
I see that. I ask because I see that in Amy, because she's a writer, and you know, she asks me a lot, like, how does this sound, and like, what do you think of this chapter? And I know, you know, with her book, we had an editor edit it, and it was a really painful process. Like, it was a very painful process for Amy. So, did you go through some growth there? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. And I paid a lot of money for it, but there was a woman, and no, it was a very positive experience. So there was a woman who was the head of an editorial association in San Francisco somewhere. I found her on a database, and because I wanted her to do basically copy editing. I wanted someone who specifically did professional copy editing. Found her name on a database somewhere, and she has amazing credentials. And so I sent my book to her, and she was really expensive. Like I couldn't afford that. It was like $1,500 to do a copy edit on this book. And I'll never forget, I sent it to her, and then she sent it back and had all these notes. And it was very eye-opening. That's when I first realized that I'm not good enough yet, because I read her notes, and the reason it stung was because my instincts were like, yeah, she's got you nailed here. That's right. That's what it is. And I ended up using her 2 more times until I ran out of money, basically. And through her notes and through her guidance, I would say she leveled me up quite a bit. That was the transition between that's how the first Armada book got to the level that it was at, was because of her. So I was still writing like Realm Jumpers, when I wrote that first draft of it, and I sent it to her, and she sent it back going, no. And we had a lot of conversations back and forth and all that kind of stuff. And then I just decided to go for it and take her advice on board. I was like, okay, here we go. Incorporate this. And then it was, by the time I had to rewrite, I had to throw it in the bin and rewrite it from scratch about 4 times, which was really painful, because the previous iterations, I was like, hey, this is pretty good, right? This is pretty, oh, no, it's terrible. Okay. Hey, what about this one? I worked, for a few months on this. No, it's still terrible.
That's rough.
But every time I was like, this hurts. But I knew, like my wife was saying this too, I knew it was getting better. It was working. She was giving me good advice. And then by the time I got to the 4th one, and I sent that into her, and she sent it back going, yes, that's it. You got it.
Good.
And then all the other feedback I got from other people was like, hey, this is really good. And I was like, oh, thank God.
I know.
She was the first one. Remember I was telling about the dialogue, right? Where it was a film script. It was only what you can see. And I had no idea I was doing that. I had just been trained to do that for 20 years before that. She was the first one who said, I'm not in their heads. You need introspection. You need to know what they're thinking. She was the first one to point that out, and really say, that's where the story is. It's in their head, because it's a book, right?
Right.
And that was tough. I had to learn how to do that. Every step of the way. He comes into the room. What's he thinking? But here's what he says. No. What's he thinking first? How is he feeling? Then say what he says. And had to get over that instinct. It was hard.
Oh, absolutely. Man, I can't imagine how painful. Yeah, that's a lot of good lessons, though. I do remember when I read the first Armada book, and it came back, and it did feel very different between the iterations. It was very good. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was painful, and it was very expensive. But my wife kept pushing me, going, you're going through the right process here. You really are, and you need to just keep going. And then once that first Armada book got to where it was, that's when I ran out of money. But I was like, I feel like the universe is telling me that you went as far as she can take you.
Right. The rest is going to be on you. And you went 3 books with Armada, and I know you're changing now. What's the desire for Armada?
So this gets to kind of one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about. Because remember in your email, you were saying, kind of have some thoughts about,
right.
And yeah, I guess one of the things I wanted to bring up is kind of, I've been doing a lot of market research. So with this new book, one of the biggest things I've done is trying to figure out where it fits in the market, how to sell it. Armada was still a bit self-indulgent, I think, for me. It was a bit niche. I made some mistakes at the conceptual stage. I was getting there, right? It's an intermediate step, but I realized some mistakes were made, and that's why ultimately it didn't sell enough to be profitable. You know, I sold the books. In fact, our local bookstore here in Salabreña, he keeps ordering them from me. You know, that's where I'm selling the books, is our local bookstore. It's actually quite popular, but online, it just didn't do anything, you know. And I made a couple of really big pushes. I spent a lot of money on advertising, you know, and I took that Mark Dawson course, which I think I told you about. And it's all about online marketing for self-published authors. He was kind of one of the pioneers of it. So I bought his course, which was pretty expensive. And I watched all the videos, and I took all his advice, and I did everything the way that he said. And I put the books out there, and then I spent a whole bunch of money on advertising, and I really made a big marketing push. All 3 books, I made a big push when I launched them. And not once in the life of Armada were they ever profitable. It never got profitable. Every time what happened was I spent a huge amount of money, and I would run out of money, you know, because the problem with advertising is you have to pay the advertising money up front, and then the book sales, Amazon pays you every 2 months, you know, so you have to do without that investment until the book sales come, if they come.
Right.
And I would run out of money in 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks, it'd be gone, you know. And that was the problem, is that's when I had to step back and go, well, wait a minute, where does this fit in the market? Because I hadn't really thought about that before. Not as much as I should have. So with this new book, what I started with the market, I started there versus going, what kind of story would I want to tell? That works for a lot of authors. There's a lot of authors out there who, what is in there, what they like to write hits a zeitgeist about what people like to read. The painful lesson I'm learning is that I don't naturally do that. So when I write something, I still think Realm Jumpers is hilarious. You know, read those old books and they crack me up to no end, but it doesn't crack anybody else up, you know. And so what I naturally want to write doesn't seem to ever hit. I had this in the problem in the film industry as well. I would make a film and people just, yeah, it's all right, you know, whatever. It just wouldn't connect. So I was going to say, I can't afford to be self-indulgent. My self-indulgence doesn't sell. It just doesn't sell. So if I want to be a profitable writer, which is what I need to be, I had to take a step back and go, okay, you can't afford to be self-indulgent in any way anymore, you know. I want to still stick to my passions. You know, I don't want to go out there and write something I hate. Right. But I have to start on the conceptual side. I have to start with the market, what sells. And what I did is I went to Amazon and I looked at the top 100 titles, or I think the top 20 titles for the Kindle store. And I looked at number 1, because in order to hit that number 1 spot in the Kindle store, you have to cross over quite a lot. You have to sell to all the other different genres. You know, you have to sell about 1,800 to 2,000 books a day to hit number 1.
Oh,
yeah. There's a tool that I have that you can calculate that. So that's why I'm pretty confident about that number. Anyways, I sat down and I started reading the books that were at number 1. All the ones that around that time. So this was 6-8 months ago or whatever. But I just sat down and started reading them one after another. And it was like all of a sudden you start seeing these patterns, you know, in terms of the conceptual side of the book. And I realized that this pattern was not that far away from what I was already working on. You know, there's always a mystery at the heart, but it's almost always the thriller genre. You know, it's almost always that. And the pace is quick. It's almost always a female protagonist. And, you know, because like female voices and female protagonists are really big right now. The shame of it, in a way, is that not necessarily female authors, but female main characters, right. What they call female voices, right? And you and I think female voice means the author. But what I realized through doing this research, no, it means the character. So it's a lot of women as the central character written by guys, you know. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of women authors that hit number 1 as well. Like Kendra Elliott's always up there, and a few others that I found. But anyways, I just noticed all the guys were writing women in the lead role as well. you know.
Interesting.
You know, and it's always a thriller. It's always fairly quick, although weirdly long books really seem to sell, like the 140,000 words books. Yeah, like those really sell big, which I don't get that. I can't write 140,000 words, you know, I don't have that in me, but anyways, my point is there was these patterns, and I realized I could adjust my writing and kind of fit those patterns. And I was like, I could do that. I could write one of those thriller books and design it for that number one spot, you know, because even if I don't hit it, that's my target. I'm moving towards, finding a bigger audience, you know.
That makes a lot of sense. I like the way you've approached a very logical methodology to what you're looking for.
Well, because it comes from not having done that before and it not working. You know?
Right.
And it was like, I don't want to write another 3 books that don't sell. It's just, I don't want to go through that anymore. We need money, you know, I want a career. I want to get this going, you know, and I want to write a book that people are going to notice. You know, I don't know if I told you this, I submitted 2 of the Armada books out to a list of agents and publishers, about 50 of them. Yeah. I have this whole database full of them, people who are open to submissions. Mm-hmm. And, they all turn me down, every single one of them, you know, and that tells me, most of them were saying, this is not something we're looking for right now. Oh, and that was a clue to me that I'm not writing something that is going to hit the market. That's going to hit a broad enough demographic. You know, it's too niche. It's just too niche. So it's like, I don't want to be niche anymore. I want to be mainstream. I want to, I want to sell books. I want to get in there. So that's why the new book, it's also why the prose style changed so much. You probably, like, to me, that was the most radical change, was the prose. And it was all about simplify, 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 simplify. So, and where that came from, which this might be really useful, because it was really useful to me. I should preface this by saying, I hate Jack Reacher books with a passion. I really, really detest them. I'm sorry if you guys are fans. I really am.
Jack, if you're out there listening, no.
Sorry, Lee, you know, but what I love is some of the advice that Lee Child has given out there. And I read a lot of articles about him because he did something that I realized I want to do. And it was an old Guardian article that said, one of the reasons his books sell so well is because he reaches non-readers. He reaches people who don't read books except for Jack Reacher books. They buy that next Jack Reacher when they see it at the supermarket. They'll buy it. But that's the only thing they read. And he has those fans, right? Now that's demographic reach, man. Like going beyond genre. You're going to people who just don't read books ever, but they read yours.
That's huge.
That's massive. I mean, that is a loyal fan base. That is really reaching out there. And so that's why I was like, how does he do it? What's the appeal? How does he get to them? Now, there's a lot of reasons why that I'm not going to follow. That whole kind of wandering cowboy, like Mad Max is like that, you know, that sort of stuff. And he went in an interesting direction, which I don't think works anymore. But when he first started this, because the first one came out in 97, I think, it's the characterless character, right? Mm-hmm. Jack Reacher is an empty void. He's a robot. He doesn't feel things. He has no character development. The Guardian article was pointing out whenever Lee Child accidentally puts Jack Reacher into a situation where he might actually have to emote, he uses the same sentence every time. He said nothing. Right?
He's like the Terminator, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's like this fighting machine, and the woman's crying. She's like, "Oh, I'm having this big problem. What do you think, Jack?" Jack said nothing. Every time.
Wow.
Anyways, one of the best pieces of advice he gave was keep your sentences short and stubby. Short and stubby. That stuck in my head. Short and stubby. And this is a guy who writes books for people who don't read books. You know, they're so accessible. And so I sat down and read some of them. Well, pieces, I hate Jack Reacher, but I read pieces of it and I was like, oh man, I see it, I see it. The rhythm is there. He came in, he punched the guy out. He said a funny one-liner and then he walked away, kicked his boots, opened the car, opened the door, got in the car, started it up, spat out the window, drove off. you know, like it was just like, pop, 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 pop,
Right.
pop, you know?
Like an 80s action movie.
Do you think that's a sign of the times, though, as far as like reader ability?
No, I don't. It's just a style.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to look at the opposite end of that, it's who I was using as a model in the very beginning of Armada, which was Anne Cleves, who you probably know from Shetlands and the Vera series. You guys know who Anne Cleves is?
No.
Mystery writer. She's English. She has 2 long-running hit adaptation shows of her works, both of them on the air for like the past 5 years.
Wow.
One of them is Shetland, which I can't recommend highly enough, and the other one's called Vera. Anyways, massive best-selling mystery author, and she goes the other way. She has long sentences that just kind of ramble on. I say ramble on, not, you know, but she writes the other way. You know, she writes really dense, detailed sentences that kind of go on, lots of commas and, you know, lots of fragments and things that just kind of just keep going and going. And it's almost like when she's writing, she's kind of looking for the meaning of the sentence as she goes, because that's exactly what she's doing. And then once she finds it, she won't go back and rewrite it much. She'll just kind of leave it there. And so when you read her books, they meander a bit. Mm-hmm. But she's a massive best-selling author. You know, her books they chart quite high. So you don't have to go short and stubby.
Right.
But Anne Cleves doesn't reach non-readers. Lee Child does, you know. Right. And so I wanted to extend my reach. I was like, all right, I'm going short and stubby because I know I can do it, because that's how they train you to do it when you're writing film scripts. In film scripts, it's use the least number of words possible, always, always, always. There's no exceptions to that, always. Because people who read film scripts have extremely short attention spans. So you got to Michael Bay it, you know, you got to go kapow, whiz, bang, wow, explosions, funny one-liner, boom, you know, you really have to ramp it up and use very, very few. So I've already been trained in that. It was like, okay, I can do this in the novel. I know how to do this. Yeah. And I really just the sentences, you know, lots of white space. That's also how they do film scripts. Lots of white space, 1 and 2 sentence paragraphs. That's it, you know, and get on to the next one. And lots of, you know, you want to put extra emphasis on a particular idea at the end of a paragraph, right? You give it its own line, right? You pull it out of the paragraph, you give it its own line. So it's a little extra emphasis. Yeah. Do that a lot, like a lot. And you suddenly you start breaking up. You don't have any big, blocky, dense blocks of text. Mm-hmm. That's death. You know, non-readers that's too much reading. It's too hard. But if there's lots of white space and really short, sharp sentences, it's easy to read. Your eyes just kind of float over the page, you know. That's how you reach non-readers.
Yeah. That makes sense. That's not intimidating. Yeah.
This new one, I really made a huge effort to learn how to do that, because that's how I want to reach out. But I want to go the opposite way than Jack Reacher. I want this character to be full of emotion, really a human being, a fleshed out human being. And I have the tools to do it because I have a wife who is a trauma therapist. So if I have a traumatized character, I can put some authenticity behind it. I can have it expressed in a fairly, I'm going to take creative license sometimes, but in a fairly authentic way. And this is, I think, is something that's becoming more and more popular. You watch shows on Netflix these days, and there's a much greater degree of importance given to this kind of stuff, you know, mental health and how people really do process emotions. It's, you know, emotions just aren't plot points anymore. There's shows that really explore this stuff, and they're big hits. They're big hits. It's really connecting to people. Jessica Jones, that's about PTSD. That's about a woman coming out of an abuse. I mean, it's a superhero show. I should mention. Have you ever heard of it?
I think we watched a little bit.
I watched a couple episodes.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. My wife, it's 3 series. Only the first one's any good. The other 2 are, but the first one, you know, it's a woman. It has nothing to do with superheroes, right? She's a superhero technically, but it has nothing to do with it. She is a woman coming out of an abusive, controlling relationship who was traumatized by it and dealing with PTSD as a result of it, right? Yeah. And all they did was, and she's super strong, you know, but the idea is her strength can't fix what's up here. right? No matter how strong she is on the outside, she's not strong up here. She doesn't feel strong up there. That was the idea. And it was about mental health, and trauma and all that kind of stuff. And apparently the first series was really, really done by someone who knew what they were talking about. And it really delved into that, even though it's playing to a superhero audience. The Avengers, it's part of the Avengers world. Right. But it's a massive hit. It was a really big hit. So I was like, I can do that.
Absolutely. With the background of your wife and then what you're learning from Lee Childs, you're kind of picking these skills, creating that perfect, the perfect model, trying to get it through. Yeah.
I'd have to say too, as a non-writer, in this podcast, I'm surrounded by writers, which is great. But as the non-writer of the group, that's one thing I really look to and I'm drawn to when I read a novel is a character that I can relate to. So one interesting thing is I actually went back and revisited 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Moby Dick. And I was surprised. I was actually very surprised at how the characters, to me, the author's point of view was very, to this day, relatable. Some of the things they were going through. And that really made the stories, that made them new for me and made them even more enjoyable because the characters were still struggling with things, that were universal. They were struggling with battles that I could go, oh, I can totally relate to that. I'm not on a whaling ship in the late 1800s, but I can relate to that. So, what you're talking about with mental health, it's a very current topic, I think.
And it makes it, like you said, it makes it universal and timeless, talking about those things.
Yeah. That's what I'm hoping for. And it's the new book isn't out yet. I'm in the proofreading stage on it now. I don't know if it's going to work yet or not. This is the best I got. This is in terms of conceptualizing and marketing. I'm just like, because I wouldn't know how to do this better at this point.
Right. You're doing everything you can. Are you going to start writing like a second book? Is this going to be another series?
That's a very, very good question. In the world of self-publishing, the advice I kept hearing over and over was, to publish as quickly as possible, which is something that I've also worked on. The days, nobody can be George R. R. Martin. You can't take 6 years to write your next book, and make it absolutely perfect. The really heavy hitters in the self-publishing world these days are the ones who are cranking them out every few months. And I'm thinking of people like Ernest Dempsey. And the woman, I can't remember her name. She writes, go on, yes. There's a woman who writes, what's it called? Middle grade or young adult fiction, all about witches. It's like this world full of witches. And she writes 9,000 words a day, publishes 2 novels a month.
That's a lot.
There's a podcast of her on YouTube, and I wish I could remember her name. And it's insane. Nobody can write that like that,
Right.
But most normal writers, it's, it's like every 2 to 4 months to publish a novel. I'm at 6 months right now, and I will really want to get it down to 4 months. Anyways, sorry, to answer your question, the advice was to just publish often. And sorry, you got to remind me of the question. I was making a big point here.
No, I was wondering, are you, before you even release it, are you going to write a second?
That's why I wrote 3 Armada books, because the advice back then was, you won't know if the series is going to be a hit until you're 3 books in. Nobody's going to trust you until you're 3 books in. And so that's why I wrote 3 books before deciding whether to do Armada or not. And I've learned that I think that advice is kind of BS. I don't think that's true. Maybe that was true at a certain time, but not anymore. So this next book, I'm going to wait until see if it sells or not. I need money in my bank account before I write the next one. But once I do decide to write the next one, I think I could do it in about hopefully 4 months. That's my goal. So I can turn it around pretty quick. I don't think I have anything I don't think I'm going to lose readers because I waited too long, to come up with that second book. So it's about being quick. you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that takes conceptualization. You have to, you know, do all your hard work in the beginning in terms of conceiving the book and thinking about it, not just in terms of that book, but also the rest of the series.
Yeah, that longevity. Like, what else is there to say with this character or this world? Like, what else is there in it? So when you're starting to create it in the first place, I suppose you've already got to have that in mind. You know, does this character in this world really only have one story to tell? Or is there more I can dig out of this, you know?
Yeah. And every writer approaches that differently. And it's like, I have the concept for the next book in place, but I'm not gonna, as I say, waste my time writing a second book if the first one doesn't sell. It's just a waste of time. So I've decided to kind of shelve that. I'm gonna send out the first book. My goal with this one, and this is sorry, are we short on time?
No.
Oh, okay. My goal with this one is, I've realized with the self-publishing world that I'm not sure it's as profitable as it once was. From what I've read, I'm in a couple of Facebook groups with self-published authors. A couple of them are exclusive because they came from my subscription to Mark Dawson's course, and he has like 15,000 students or something like that. And a lot of them talk in these Facebook groups about very technical issues that they're dealing with. And also they talk about profitability. Can they make a living at it? And I've just noticed that the ones who really hit it big kind of hit the crest of the wave, which seems to be about 2013 to 2015. Anybody who got into it back then, if they're any kind of a writer at all and ran a few ads, those are the ones that blew up really big.
Right.
And I would say kind of after 2016, is the kind of the latter half of the gold rush. All of a sudden everybody's jumping into it. And I've realized that Facebook and Amazon, who are, very good at recognizing trends, kind of realized that they were the first two out of the gate with the advertising platforms. And I just feel like they've come up with a lot of different ways, very subtle ways of raising their prices. In like Facebook, one of the first things they did was get rid of organic growth. If you want growth on their website, you have to pay for it. It doesn't happen organically anymore. They blocked it. It does not happen. Stuff like that. Like that was a big issue at the time. And they want to make sure you pay them for advertising, because that's one of their biggest income streams is advertising. And I've just realized that there's a million other authors now who are doing it. So it's hard to kind of break through all that. And Facebook and Amazon have gotten a lot more expensive. So the profit margins are kind of squeezed, Yeah. And I've just kind of been reading between the lines about a lot of people talking about their lives and their careers, and they talk about writing all these books. And sometimes they have like 20 books out, and yet they're still working, they're still working.
Right.
And I was looking at that going, is this the way to do this anymore? Mark Dawson has made a lot of money selling this online course about how to become a profitable author self-publishing. But he came up in 2013,
Exactly.
The world was very different back then, right? I think it's the methodology. I don't think that works anymore because the business has changed. Facebook and Amazon are soaking up most of that money now. So I'm looking at that going, okay, well, this was always going to be hard. Breaking into writing, is always going to be difficult. What's the new way?
Right. What's the next iteration?
Right.
And my guess.
Oh, we're running out of juice here. We're gonna
Technical difficulties. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I can pause for a second.
Oh.
Yes, please. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
One of the reasons I had to change rooms.
Oh, right.
It was down to 7%, and I was like, I don't think that's going to make it.
We've got a lovely old house that only some of the outlets work.
It's on the list. It's just way down there.
Yeah, right. It's on the massive to-do list.
I have one of those. Yeah.
How's that?
Oh, all right. We're all good now. Sorry about that, Jefferson. Because I'm super excited to hear what you have to say, because for the last 15 minutes, you've been crushing my dreams. You've been like...
Wait, okay. So let me finish, because I didn't mean to do that.
No.
So I'm looking at this, and my approach has changed. And I'm realizing I think the way in the future is going to be more of a hybrid between traditional publishers and self-publishers. Now, don't get me wrong, you can still go online. I mean, you can still self-publish your books, and a lot of people are making money. Mm-hmm. I should say that. They're not quitting their jobs, but they're making money. They are selling. So that was the step I could never do myself, was the stepping up to profitability. I think you can still do that. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have. But in terms of, getting to that next point, that next milestone, just quitting your job, that's where I'm seeing a lot of people aren't reaching that level anymore. And so I'm thinking that the next crest of this wave is going to be going between the two worlds. And the way I'm planning on doing that is, this book, I'm not going to self-publish. This book has been so designed to be readable and to have mass appeal that I think that's what traditional publishers are looking for. That's what they want more than anything in this world. Now, one thing a traditional publisher can do better than any self-published author out there is take a small hit and turn it into a big hit. That's something they can do better than any of us can, right. Because they have resources that we don't. That takes a lot of money, upfront money, I should say. And then it comes back later, And I would really like to believe that this book, because it's been written, it's designed from scratch to be a hit, to be mass market appeal type of hit. I think, I really like to think that once it gets out there, it will be some kind of a hit. And it will appeal to these traditional publishers. So the problem with traditional publishers is that all they really want, and it's exactly the same in the film industry, all they really want is the fast cash. Right? They want that giant, big monster hit that's going to be a big hit right out of the gate. And, like in the music industry, they want the one-hit wonder, right? One-hit wonders, that's where the money.
Yeah.
And then if your next book does anything less than that, you're dropped. Pow, you're just dropped. So knowing that, like, okay, so how do you come up with a plan around that? If that is definitely going to be an issue. Now, I listened to a podcast with a woman, once again, whose name I don't remember, who had that happen. She sold a book, and it was $375,000 advance.
Wow.
First time author. So this still happens. In fact, there was that woman, Ven Randig, who just did a 7-way auction between all the publishers and made mid-6 figures for her debut novel.
Wow. Oh my good.
During the lockdown, during the pandemic. So the thing is that kind of stuff still happens. It definitely still happens. So they're always looking for that next big hit. So what if mine is something that they think will be a big hit? I don't know whether it will be or not, but all I need them to do is believe that it will be. So they give me an advance, they pick it up, they put the book out there. I'd like to think that it'll sell pretty well. Let's say I write book 2. It doesn't sell quite as well. They drop me, which is very, very common, right? They smell failure on you, you're done. Because they're moving on because there's 1,000 other authors out there, right? Yeah. They're moving on to that next big hit, which is fine. What that does is that gives me a window of opportunity. Because if that first book is a hit, the publishers are really going to push it. They're really going to put some marketing oomph behind it. You have brand awareness, right? But you only have it for a short period of opportunity, or a short period of time. So how do you make use of that? Assuming it's very, very temporary. This is where Mark Dawson comes into play. One of his biggest pieces of advice out there is to do a mailing list, right? To own your readers. Mm-hmm. And if you go to his website is just an email collector. It's really sexy and beautiful looking, but the first thing you see are not his books, where to buy his books. It's how to sign up to his newsletter, right. And he is a massive, massive, massive proponent of this. And he's like, and I think that advice is still good. That still works. I talked to a woman on Facebook once because I was, decrying the fact that my ads weren't working and I wasn't being very profitable. And this woman sent me a private message. And she said, she was in the same boat, but while she was on a traditional print deal and had all this oomph behind her, she started developing a mailing list. And she got 45,000 people signed up to this mailing list, which is huge. Mark Dawson, I think, is 65, 70,000. And she said when her publisher dropped her, it was okay because she could still make an honest living just selling books to her email list, to her mailing subscribers, right? She said that was the smartest thing she ever did because even though the publisher dropped her, she owned those readers. She had her own contact with her. She had her own way to sell to people who were fans of hers. She didn't need the publisher anymore. And she said that was like 10 years ago, and she's made a living at it ever since. Wow. I thought that was brilliant. Brilliant.
That really is.
And that woman who got the big $375,000 advance I told you about, she didn't do that. So on this podcast, she says she just assumed all of her books were going to sell like that. And then her next book sold slightly less. Like it still was a hit, but it sold slightly less. And a publisher, they don't keep the amount of your advance based on how good an author you are. It's based on the sales of your last book. And so the next book she gave to the publisher, they bought it, but it was a $15,000 advance.
Oh, wow.
And then the next one was $10,000.
Oh. And
then after that, she said she was lucky to just be published after that. And so she was saying, I should have done more with that. There was a moment in time where she was a hit. And then she said she squandered it. She didn't save any of the money. She just assumed the next book would do well. So, blah, 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 blah. She ended up back in the same boat as all the rest of us, And then I think she said she got down to $7,000 advance before she was able to get her writing up to a higher level and start selling again. Anyways, so that's my plan. Sell it to a traditional publisher. Give them what they're looking for. Right. Have them put the book out there. Hope it's some kind of a hit and they smell money on it, because then they'll make a big push, but it'll be very temporary. And that's when I get in there and start running ads on Facebook, because Facebook is really well designed for this. Not to sell books, because that's the publisher's job, is to get people signed up to my mailing list. Yeah. And while I have this kind of awareness, while I'm in the charts, right? If I get up to like number 5 or number 10 or even number 33 or something, you still have to be selling a lot of books. But every one of those people who buys that book, hit them, sign up to my mailing list, And if they see that message enough times, they will. And really, really use that time to pull those email subscribers in and get that list built up so that if book 2 doesn't do well and you're dropped, you have your readers,
That's fantastic.
And and now people are getting really sophisticated with how they work how they use the email list, how to communicate with, there's a website called Newsletter Ninja. Have you ever heard of it? Mm-hmm. Newsletter Ninja. And it's a service that helps you sell to your mailing list, how to make sure people remember you and how to stay in contact but don't annoy them. And most importantly, how to make sure they buy your book when you put the announcement out there that your book is for sale. Mm-hmm. The tools for that are getting really, really good. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's something that's going away. I don't think the business is going to move away from that anytime soon, because that's a direct human relationship between the author and their readers.
Exactly.
And so you basically use the traditional print people to get to that level where you can pull in enough subscribers to build a career around.
I love that. See, you just turned my day around. First you crushed me and I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to be a writer. But now you've given me hope.
See, this is why he's a writer, though. He lured you in.
That's it. You did what writers do, right?
He tortured you. And then he gave you a happy end.
Story arc.
Yeah. Well, I feel so much better about being a writer now. Thank you. Because I think that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Let the publishing house do that hard work of finding the tribe, of finding the fans. And then once you can collect them, they'll follow you wherever you go. That's the brilliance, I think, of gathering a social media following. If you've got lots of people on Twitter or Facebook, if they're looking directly at you, I think that's good.
This is something I've learned through a lot of this marketing research. Part of that is a myth. The idea of social media presence doesn't sell books. It doesn't sell books. In 2013, it did. When you were, because I read a lot of advice out there still of people saying, try to make your presence as big as you can on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram and all that. And it's BS. Because people who like your post on Facebook don't buy your book. People who sign up for your mailing list because they want to know when your next book comes out, they buy books. So it's the rabbit hole, right? It's called the rabbit hole, and it's like it's a time suck. Going on Twitter and trying to gain followers is not going to sell you books. It's just going to take time away from writing, and that it's always about that next book, because once you get those loyal readers, you have to give them the content, And I've read about authors who have taken too long to come out with books, because in the self-publishing world, people are used to now 6 months or less, for that next book. That's become normal. And so if you take a year and a half, to come out with book 2 and book 3, you'll sell. You'll have a small core group of loyal readers, but you're not going to get much beyond that. Because people are going to move on. They're going to have read quite a lot of other books before your next one comes out, and they may not remember you. So it kind of goes part and parcel with publish often and make sure you stay in touch through your newsletter with people who will actually buy the books, and that's how you kind of are able to churn it out book after book after book, and you're able to sell and sell and sell.
How do you feel about things like Patreon?
I barely understand what it is. I've heard of it, but I don't understand what it is.
So Patreon is this service where you can, hopefully you gain a following of people who pay you per month something, an amount of money to create your projects, whatever they are. And then each month they get these rewards. So it'll be like, they get behind the scenes information, or like maybe a free chapter, or, some kind of thing. But then they're paying you whatever it is, $5 a month, $10 a month. And then you get this large collection of followers. And, again, some people have done really well on it. The majority of people, maybe they'll get a small group of followers and they're making $12 a month.
Yeah.
It's really random that way.
Yeah. Does it work for a lot of people, or?
What do you think, Chris?
I don't know. As far as writers go, I couldn't tell you. I know there's a lot of other people out there with various other projects. It's a big one for musicians. I think quick turnaround time with the product would be a very valuable asset when doing Patreon, because people are expecting, like you said, it's almost like building a club, building your tribe. Mm-hmm. They want that behind the scenes access. So whatever, people who've done it well, they cultivate that behind the scenes access to make their followers feel like they're getting something for their money.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so some people have done really well on it, and it's, they're thousands of dollars a month kind of thing, but I think it's hit or miss depending upon what you offer and then who you can draw in again.
Well, and also what kind of person you are. It comes down to your personality and how you think. And it's like I feel like some people could really make that work, and some people it's just not a good fit.
I have a question. So as writers, we can, if we choose to, we can stand behind our work and just go, okay, here's the work. Here are the books. Just read the books and love the books. But then there are also writers who can say, I'm the author. Look at me. I'm the personality. I'm the brand. You know what I mean? Yeah. They wear it. And I also read the books. Where do you stand on that? Are you kind of like, I'm going to be behind the book and just read the work? Or do you want to be the brand a little bit and the face?
I am quite a sociable person. I really look forward to meeting readers. That's going to be one of my favorite parts of this career, if I can ever get it off the ground. And I would say I would do it more like there's a writer called Ernest Dempsey. who writes kind of like National Treasure style action thrillers. Kind of goofy stuff, but that's the point. It's goofy fun, Mm-hmm. He's been around quite a while now. He's from Nashville. And that's kind of what he does. Now, he gives the advice of kind of be everywhere. That was his advice. I heard him on a podcast. And he said, just be everywhere. So he goes, he's on all of the social media platforms. He does videos on YouTube all the time. And if you go to his website, it's his face everywhere. It's like, hi, I'm Ernest Dempsey. Normal. But he loves it. He's a bit of a ham bone, but that's what he enjoys, and it works for him. And he's a crazy best-selling author, He also publishes every, 60 to 90 days.
Really?
60 to 90 days, yeah. The guy's just a machine. And it's like, he started writing, and then it felt like in the first year, all of a sudden he had like 6 books, and you're like, whoa, Jesus.
Like, slow down, you're making the rest of us look bad.
Yeah. But, and so that's kind of the other extreme where he really likes to do that. I'm not sure I'm going to like plant my face out there quite so much, but yeah, I do want more. Personally, I really want to meet the readers. I really want them to know me. So I would think I'd be a bit more of the face of the brand versus someone like, what's his name? JT Ryan, LT Ryan, who's like very much a, what's his name? Guy who wrote Catcher in the Rye. What's his name?
Salinger?
Yeah, he's a Salinger style recluse.
Okay.
Never does interviews.
Really?
He writes espionage thrillers, kind of Jack Reacher style espionage thrillers, which there's such a big appetite for. But, oh, hello.
We have a mini guest.
Can you say hi?
Hey, up from a nap, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Hey, Jefferson, nice meeting you. I'm going to go play babysitter for a while, so thank you so much for doing this.
No problem. Yeah, you go do what you got to do.
Yep.
Hey.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was going to mention, you were saying that this author you mentioned was a real recluse, but they're very successful?
Extremely.
I'm surprised at that, because to me, in my head, I'm thinking that with social media and with everything being so in your face all the time, I would almost assume that authors need to have that physical presence to get their stuff read. But what you're telling me is that that's not exactly true. You can be a hermit and still be, successful.
Yeah, it seems to be the case. Because, the life, especially in the self-published authors, you don't do a lot of publicity, really.
Right.
So I don't think it's such a huge part of the, I think Ernest Dempsey does it because he likes to do it. He's giving advice like, you got to do this in order to sell books. I don't think so. I think he just enjoys it. Mm-hmm. I would say most self-published authors lean pretty heavily towards the recluse side, where their name, like their name is publicized, but not really their faces. It pops up on a profile shot on the Amazon Author Central or something. But, a lot of people don't even put their face on their websites,
Sure. Maybe there's a little photo that's like 10, 15 years old that they're like, I've been using it forever, and that's about it.
Do you know the name Barbara Freathy? You heard Barbara Freathy?
Yeah, I don't
know. Barbara Freathy is, I don't know if she still holds this title, but as of fairly recently she did, is the single best-selling author in the Kindle store history.
Really?
Nobody on this earth has sold more ebooks than Barbara Freathy. She is a romance author. And when you go to her website, she had it professionally designed by somebody, and it's all right, it's fine. And, I've read pieces out of her books, and, it's good. And it's romance. It's not my thing. But, and then you read this thing where it's like, nobody's sold more books than her in history. It's like,
how is that?
Whoa. Anyways, she's not all over her website, The only reason I know what she looks like is because I saw this video podcast that she did. And she seems like a very down-to-earth person. You wouldn't know that she is like queen of ebooks. You wouldn't know it. Although what was funny is the interview I saw with her. She was sitting in her apartment in Manhattan on the Upper West Side. And she was sitting there, you could tell this was her workstation, and she was just kind of, talking to like we are here. And then you look behind her, and it's just like, whoa, this massive sprawling apartment with floor to ceiling windows overlooking the city. And you're like, that's where you put your money, was buying that thing.
Exactly. Oh,
stunning apartment. God. And I don't think she noticed it. I think she just opened her computer because you could tell it was her workstation, and she just didn't notice it. And it's like, yeah. There we go.
That's how you can tell.
But you don't know what her face looks like. She doesn't have her face all over her book covers. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. She's very, I think she does more publicity naturally just because she's, in a kind of a league all by herself. But I don't think she does a lot. I don't think she spends much time. She publishes really often. I know that. She writes fast.
Mm-hmm. That's one thing I have yet to really conquer, is the writing fast part of the job. I got to move faster.
It's practice. I guess you have to prioritize it, and then it just takes practice. Because I was really slow as well. That first Realm Jumpers book took me ages. It took me well over a year to conceive it and then get it to the point where it was publishable. That took a long time. And then the second one was, I think, close to a year. And then that's when I kind of realized I was taking too long. And so for Armada, I was like, not only do I have to be better, but I want to be faster. Mm-hmm. And the second book, I think, the first Armada book, I think, was, still too long. It was still like 10 months, and I was like, I can't do this. But I went through all those different iterations, and that all took time,
That's true.
And then it was the second Armada book that I finally hit the 6-month mark, start to finish. But I really made a big effort. I really was, I guess, once again, you have to let go, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be perfect in the way that you think it has to be perfect. I think what, the readers are going to assume everything you're writing is intentional. And you look at it and you see a mess. You're like, well, I didn't really get to the point there, and I'm not sure what that's about. You see what it could be. You see the potential. But the readers aren't going to see that. They're going to assume you reached that potential, and that's what it is. And so at a certain point, you have to, let it go, and just, it is.
Right. It's out of your hands. And, that's where book 2 comes in. Maybe you'll do things a little bit different for book 2 or book 3, or refining,
Book 1 is always going to take longer, right? It's always going to take longer because you have to start from scratch. So I would say, what are you working on right now?
So I'm working on, I have a science fiction novel that I'm working on. That's kind of my genre. I'm sci-fi fantasy.
The same one you told me about a long time ago.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've been writing this for such a long time. And it's just, I have it written. I just need to go through the edits. But there's so many.
You've had it edited?
I'm editing it right now. I've had beta readers look at it.
Oh, right.
Now I'm going through. Yeah. Now I'm going through that process. How many times have you gone through that beta reading, editing? Like I talked to some writers who are saying, I'm on my 15th version of edits. And I'm thinking, oh man, if that's how many I have to go through, I'm in trouble.
Can I change your life?
Yes, please.
You may want to write this down.
Okay.
Larry Brooks.
Larry Brooks.
Larry Brooks.
Okay, I know Albert Brooks. I don't know Larry Brooks.
Larry Brooks is a nonfiction author who wrote a book called Story Engineering.
Oh.
Now, this was the book that changed my life because it's all about how to structure a novel. Story engineering, right?
Yeah.
All it is. Quick preface. Skip like the first 3-4 chapters. He just kind of blah, 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 blah. He's a salesman. He's a big time like Jordan Peterson type salesman.
Oh, okay.
So the first 3 chapters or so before he gets to the good stuff, it's just him trying to sell you, hey, come on over here. If I got a product for you, it's like, I bought the book. You don't have to sell this.
I'm already here.
anyways, skip, get past there's a long introduction. Anyways, once you get through all that stuff and get to the meat of it, it's amazing. He gives really good advice about how to structure a novel. The reason he does that is he says, and I really took this on board when I was doing this latest one, which I think I'm calling the Beetle books in my head. I'm just calling, because her name was Beetle, right? So I was just calling it the Beetle books. He gave a wonderful piece of advice. He said, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to publish your first draft. So a first draft is never perfect, but you should be able to fix the first draft rather than chuck it in the bin and have to start over and rewrite it, or more importantly, restructure it. And I thought that was brilliant. And he said, if you do the work in the beginning when it comes to structuring and outlining and understanding why the events happen the way that they do, then when you write after you write the first draft of the book, the structure should already be there. Everything should be in place, and then it's just tweaking. It's just tweaking. And I really, really took that on board. That's how you publish fast. You write the book once, not 15 times. You write it once, right? You write an outline once, you write the book once, you publish. It's out the door. And then you get on to the next one. I adore that thinking because A, you publish quick, but B, it's always fresh. To me, if I had to rewrite it, like doing the first Armada novel, by the fourth iteration, I was just, oh God, this is getting tired,
Right.
You're trampling it so often. It's not fresh anymore. You never lose that freshness, and obviously you get it, he was like, you have to get it, copy edited and beta read and all that, but all the changes that you're given, there's no reason why you should ever go back and do a complete rewrite. You just fix the text you got. That's brilliant. I think 100% that's true. Especially in self-publishing, you have to publish really quick. Right. But I love that life, to be able to just move on to the next book, always new, always fresh, always exploring this stuff. And then it never gets tired. You never just always rewriting, get bogged down in rewrites. Because I've been there, man. I've done that a lot.
No, I love that, because part of what my problem is you work on one project for so long that your creative mind is throwing in, hey, what about this one? What about, hey, let's start a new novel again because it's fresh. Yes. You've got fresh new ideas, and then your energy gets split in half because you want to go this direction, but you're still trying to slog away on that old project. Like, I must get this through.
But if it's a slog, then that means it's not really working, is it? That's what it tells to me. If you're really like, oh man, I don't know what to do with this one, it doesn't work. And what Larry was saying is that's because you didn't structure it. You didn't do the outline. Every time you write a chapter, you should know exactly what happens in the next chapter, because it's already been structured, and you know what the whole story arc is. And the beautiful thing is he gives a really wonderful beat sheet, which has become my mantra. About, there's 4 different sections, and then there's the plot points in between. And then, these things he calls pinch points. I'll let you read it and explore it. I highly recommend. But it really gives you a sense of the entire arc of the whole novel and what the function is of every single chapter. And so what that gives you is every time you start writing that next chapter, you know everything. You know where it fits in the whole story. You know where it needs to end. You know what the beats are, what you need to say to get to that next chapter, And you never lose that momentum, You start writing the book and you just blaze right through it. And that's fun. And the cool thing is you're confident as well. The structure works. That's what I did for this one, It's a first draft only. That's my new rule. First draft only, no second drafts. I fix the first draft. Anything that's wrong with the first draft, I fix it and out the door. And it's because I did a beat sheet in the beginning. I did a beat sheet, and then I did an outline, which was, quite detailed. And also because I understand why the structure that he details works, why it pulls the story from beginning to end, why it never lets your story get too slow or bogged down in any one particular element of the story. Mm-hmm. That momentum is always, for the reader, is always there. It's always rushing through. And that was one of the first things that my wife said when she read this one. Was she was like, yeah, this moves really quick, like really quick. It never gets slow. And I was like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah.
That was the point. I made a huge effort to make sure that there was never any one particular chapter where I wasn't sure what to do, or I kind of want to say this thing, but I'm not sure how to put it, or no, none of that confusion that bogs you down, right?
Right. When I feel like that would be a great way to efficiency of words, efficiency of chapters, because I feel like sometimes in writing, there's a tendency to go, well, I'm going to write this chapter because I feel like we should have something about them sitting and talking about the situation, like, why don't we'll all go to a restaurant and we'll just talk about what's going on, just because I feel like they should be doing that, in the course of their day, they should, okay, dinner's now, so let's sit down and have dinner. And, but that's a great way to go, what's important. Yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah, we're having dinner, right,
Right.
And so I guess that kind of thinking, I've realized, is self-indulgence for the author, which is so hard to get out of. And I know, because I was, not to put it coarsely, but I had my head up my ass for most of my adult life. I've only just recently realized that you got to keep the reader in mind. What did they want? How do they want the story to go?
Right.
It's very different than how I want the story to go, because I want to explore all these things that I find interesting. But if I'm writing this book for other readers, not just for me to read, mm-hmm. I feel like I've already written the books that's just for me. That was Realm Jumpers.
Those are just fun.
But so yeah, that's why that structure, like where that came from, I should mention, is another reason why I kind of jumped into this new project so quickly is my brother-in-law. He has this weird superhuman ability to learn new skills very quickly and learn how to do things really well in a very short period of time. And he has a whole set of skills that he's collected over his lifetime. Where he was a hairdresser for a while. He went through a painting stage where he painted these. He went through a chess master stage where nobody I know can beat him at chess. His paintings are stunning, or gorgeous. And every time he picks up a thing, he does a bit of research, and then he tries it out, and then it's like, whoa, he really. Now the drawback to that is that his attention span is short. So he'll do something really well and then drop it and never come back to it again. He'll just drop it. He'll become to the point where he could make money at it and then just walk away. It's stunning.
It's got to be frustrating to see.
Yes. He comes to me one day and says, I think I'm going to write a novel. And he's like, yeah, I've been doing some research into how to write a novel, and I found this really good book about how to do it, and I think I'm going to follow that formula. And I was like, what's the book? What's the book? Because every time he does something, he does a little bit of research, and then he's really a master at it. Wow. And what it turns out is he had spent like a few months reading all these different books about how to write a novel. He read like 10 of them. I mean, it was amazing. And he said most of them were crap, except for this one. And it was Larry Brooks. And he was like, this is a good one. This is the one I'm going to use. And I just know it's like, if my brother-in-law is going to do it, that's the one I need to use. So that's how I found it. So I went literally the next day. I went out and I found the book on Amazon, downloaded it, read it almost cover to cover. I was like, I need to incorporate this. And also I need to publish before him, because if he publishes first and becomes a super big hit, that's just going to crush me.
I know, right?
So thankfully, because of my experience, I was able to go through this process a lot faster than he is. And his life got busy, so he's had to put the book down for a little while. So I was like, I'm going to be a
little happy on the back end. Oh, I'm so sorry, but inside you're smiling.
But that's how that Larry Brooks came to me, and it's like he's been vetted. If my brother-in-law Barry has read all these other books and he says Larry Brooks is the one, then Larry Brooks is the one.
Right. Then that's what you're taking. It makes sense to me. Yeah.
And then I read it and I was like, now I see why this is the one. I absolutely see why. The structure is solid. It makes sense. And also everybody else uses it, you know, whether they know it instinctually or whether they really sit down and outline it. But he has a long list of books and movies and all kinds of stuff. And he's like, look, everybody uses this structure to one way or another. And the book that he uses as kind of a model that he keeps referring back to is Da Vinci Code. You know, one of the biggest hits on the planet. And he was like, look, Da Vinci Code followed this model to a T. You know, absolutely every step of the way followed this model, you know. And I was like, okay, I'm on board. You got me.
Yeah, right. You sold me. That's for sure.
So this book that you read, I'm so happy you read it now. I can refer to it. But, you know, Pretty Green Eyes follows that model to a T as well. You know, it hits every one of those points where it needs to hit those points. And I'm guessing, regardless of what you think of it, it wasn't slow, was it?
No. And honestly, I mean, I was going to say, when you said it was a first draft, I'm shocked because it reads like you've worked on it for a year. It reads like it's been so polished after several, you know, it really.
Right. Because Larry was saying that there's usually people make that so much harder than it needs to be. You know, he's like, if you do your work in the beginning, it's so much harder to write a first draft and then to completely rewrite it and restructure it again, because you're writing 100,000 words, you know, versus in the outline stage, you have to rewrite, you know, a few thousands, right? That's much easier. It takes a lot less time and effort to do that. And versus rewriting 100,000 words, which is a lot of work. And I was like, that makes sense, right? That makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know where you're going. Like I've never understood authors, and I mean, it's totally valid process, but I know that there are authors out there who just, they just write the novel as it comes to them. And maybe they just have a really great internal process of how it goes. But for me, I agree with you. Like I need to know what comes next. I need to know where I'm going to end up. And that's just the only way that I can see through the novel.
You know, I'd be really curious if you gave that book a read. He has like beat sheets and stuff like that kind of break it down into smaller chunks. But I would be curious to see how your book fits into that. Whether how much it follows that model or not. You know, and maybe if it would help, if you looked at it and went, oh, I see, that's what that third act or that third part is supposed to do, or here's what I need to do in the first act to get to the blah, 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 you know, or whatever it is. I'd be curious to see if it helps at all. You know, I know you've already written it and everything, but if you're running into structural problems, or like I said, if you're getting bogged down in rewrites, and like little stuff is easy, right? But is it the stuff you're having, is it bigger structural issues where, you know, you have to rearrange the chapters, or this needs to happen sooner, or that, you know, is it big stuff like that, or is it little
some of it's kind of structural, because I feel like I tend to write in a white room sometimes. I have that everything is in my head and I don't share enough with the audience.
Oh, I see.
You know, so okay. When the beta readers look at it, they're like, well, it's good, but I don't know what exactly, you know, you mean by this, or where this was going, because it was in my head and it was obvious to me. Yeah. But then I need to kind of build it up a little bit. You know, I need to kind of, like I said, fill out that white room a little bit sometimes. So that's the editing that I'm doing.
So you have to add more. Your beta readers are telling you to add more, because that's unusual. Usually it's cut this, cut that, you know.
Have you read Robert Heinlein?
No, I haven't actually.
Heinlein's like a 70s sci-fi, kind of Isaac Asimov, that era.
No, I know who he is. Yeah.
Okay. So Heinlein, he is, I think, I find him really well known for writing super concise, kind of short, but it's all about the characters and why they're there. You don't really need to know what the wallpaper looks like. You know what I mean? You don't even really get to know that much about the surrounding and what the characters look like. You get really basic. And I admired that kind of efficiency of the plot and the words. So I tend to write, I think, more on that level. And that's not exactly selling right now. You know what I mean? Especially in sci-fi or fantasy genres, things are epic, right? It's always bigger, better.
World building.
More.
Yeah.
Yeah, world building. Yeah.
Yeah. I have noticed in the fantasy genre, I mean, it's like if your book isn't that thick, then people are like, well, you know, does everything have to be Lord of the Rings? You know, you have to like nothing. Not everything has to be Game of Thrones, right? Where it's just
right.
a massive giant with 1,000 characters, all of who are moving around at the same time and doing different motivations. And yeah,
right. And I feel like there's, especially for authors like myself who are younger writers, meaning new to the business, not physically young, but people who are newer to the business. I think if you want to write in those genres, there's a tendency to just make filler. You know, these chapters are just filled with stuff just to make it feel epic. You know, I brought you into this room and now I'm going to tell you how amazing this room is because it's epic. You know,
I wonder, I have a feeling you could make it work doing the Heinlein style as long as they were quick enough. Mm-hmm. I bet there's a niche of readers out there. I don't know how big it is, who knows? But I bet there's a niche of readers out there who are like you and don't need everything to be super big, giant, massive. You know, if they made a movie out of this, it'd have to be all, you know, 3-parter or something. Right. If it felt brisk enough, right? If it was easy to read and you kind of like, it sounds like the way Heinlein did it. It just, right. It goes really quick. Mm-hmm. It seems to me in theory that if you prefer that kind of, you know, writing, surely there's an audience for it, you know?
Well, that's what I assume. Yeah, that's what I assume. And
go ahead.
I was going to say, and to me, especially in science fiction, so there's really two camps, right? Fantasy and sci-fi. And fantasy, they want the big George R. R. Martin, you know, large novel kind of stuff. Sci-fi, I think you can get away with not being that robust as long as you're captivating. You know, as long as everything you're talking about kind of is intriguing, kind of catching the mind kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm hoping.
You're outside my realm of experience. You know, I don't know what's going on in fantasy and sci-fi these days. You know, I went through quite a deep sci-fi stage when I was much younger. And I read, my big author was Arthur C. Clarke. I read everything Arthur C. Clarke ever wrote. Pretty much his whole oeuvre. I wrote, you know, even those terrible Venus books. I mean, I read everything. And he was exactly the opposite of, I would say, Robert Heinlein. Not in terms of, you know, writing short, but in terms of he could care less about the people. He could just, it's like he did not care. The people were robots. They were there to describe the room. Like, and that's what it was all about, describing the room. I was 13. I didn't see that. I couldn't see that that's what his writing was about, you know. It makes sense to me now. Like, I couldn't read those books now because I can't read a book that's devoid of humanity, you know. And they really, like Rendezvous with Rama doesn't have people in it.
That's,
you know, and you realize why he was such a good fit with Stanley Kubrick, because Stanley Kubrick was the filmmaking version of that. He hated characters too. You know?
Yeah, you can
a perfect match.
That makes so much sense. I think for me in the sci-fi genre, my worry is that we've gone from sci-fi being like swashbuckling in space, which is where I want to live, to being like, if you don't have a degree in physics and engineering, why are you even here? You know, like I feel like there's a strong tendency towards, if you don't have a hard science university degree, you know, I want to read about the real science. And I'm more about, like, again, the people, the emotional aspects. I want to see the characters moving around in an amazing setting. But really, at the end of the day, it's about the characters. It's about the swashbuckling. You know, I'm thinking, you know, Indiana Jones on the moon kind of stuff. And that's where I want to go, you know.
Awesome.
Hopefully there's
fun.
All right. Yeah. Hopefully people want to follow me on that journey. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. Look, I'm sorry. It's getting really late for me. I need to head downstairs.
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize for taking so much of your time. Thank you so much, Jefferson, for coming on the podcast with us. And I think I had a really good time, and I'm really glad that you took the time out of your day to join us. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's been a lot of fun.